In Babylonia, there was a scribe, a priest scribe, whose name was Berossus. And he mourned the fact that no one was going to study cuneiform anymore, and people were not ambitious anymore, they were lazy, and now they were using this alphabet. And he knew that the whole thing was going to die. And he said, and then people will never be able to read our history, and it will all be forgotten. So he wrote a history of Babylonia based on all the Babylonian ancient records and so on. But he wrote the history in Greek because he wanted the world to know about it. You know. Had he written it in Babylonian, we wouldn't have known about it for 2,000 years. He wrote it in Greek. Now in Egypt, you had another fellow by the name of Manetho, and he also had the same problem. He said, nobody's studying hieroglyphic, will be forgotten, history will be wrong. He knew Egyptian hieroglyphic, he knew the histories, he wrote a history of Egypt. He wrote it in Greek. So Manetho's history of Egypt and Berossus's history of Babylonia were written in Greek, and had these works been preserved, we would have had a treasure of the histories of these ancient civilizations written in Greek by people who knew them. The only problem is that the Christian church was intent on destroying all pagan works, and so they annihilated and burned these books. So what we have in Berossus is a quotation here and there, but interesting quotations. And in the case of Manetho, we have quotations in many other writers, and the most of Manetho is in the writings of a Jewish historian by the name of Josephus Flavius. And Josephus Flavius, who wrote the history of the Jews, and he quotes Manetho extensively, was preserved because he was a Jew, and the church said, well, he was a Jew and he lived in the Holy Land at the time of Jesus, so got to keep his work. So the church let his work live, and so we have, from Josephus, we have a lot of ancient history, which he quotes when he quotes from Egyptian Manetho and so on. Now, yes?
I'm sorry, could you repeat about when the Phoenicians toned down the symbols and started out?
The Phoenicians, when did they make the alphabet? We have written, we have the alphabet on clay tablets, alphabet from 1600 BC. My guess is always give them another 100 years or so before they invented it, but it's already written out, and it's the same form, the alphabet. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, and so on, all the way down. And that is from these. Now, they wrote on clay tablets, they wrote alphabetic script on clay tablets. They modified the cuneiform system and reduced it to 30 symbols. So we have there a lot of their materials which are written on clay tablets in cuneiform, but alphabetic cuneiform. But they also created the linear alphabet, which is the alphabet that we have, in which the, the symbols were made to represent names and figures. So the Aleph in Phoenician and in Hebrew means ox. So this was the symbol for Aleph, a picture of an ox. Bet means house, and whatever form it had at the time, okay. So bet is house. A gimel means camel, and so on. Dalet means door. Each symbol represented a picture, but it was purely phonetic, purely consonantal. And so they reduced the system of writing to 30 symbols, and that's enough to write any language. But, as I say, it was resisted by the great systems that dominated until a long time later. And by the way, the Phoenician alphabet was adopted by the Greeks and the Latins, and they modified it slightly, and then it came down to later languages, and was used, of course, and modified again and again. I want to get to the great civilization of Babylonia, which emerged out of the Akkadian, the Sumerian and the Akkadian. You know, there are certain things that we don't know because we don't have the records, but we also know the end results, so we can surmise or assume what happened before that. What we do know is that by 2000 BC, Sumerian civilization was already declining in the face of the advance of the Semitic languages that were beginning to dominate in the region. The major languages being Babylonian. But the people who were Babylonian speakers, from their names, we know that they came from the eastern seaboard of the Mediterranean, because their names are essentially Canaanite or Hebrew names, which are put into Babylonian form. And the last great renaissance of Sumerian civilization came around 2000 BC, during the reign of someone by the name of Gudea of Lagash. This is a very interesting figure. Gudea of Lagash Lagash was a city, a state. Gudea was its ruler. What's interesting is that he doesn't use the name king. He uses the name Ensi, which means prince or prime minister or something like that. But, you know, the fact that he was the dominant figure, and in fact he was the monarch, leads me to believe that for some reason, you know, in the modern world, after kings were eliminated in the 20th century, rulers, and I'm talking about monarchs with absolute power, arose whose names, titles were secretary, okay? Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. As monarch as the czars, more so. Leader, El Cadillo in Spain, or El great leader in Cuba. I mean, these people are not kings, but they have more power than kings. And for some reason, in the modern world, they don't like to use the name monarch. I think that Gudea may have been in a similar position where he doesn't use the title king, but we see that he was the ruler. And not only that, his sculptures are all over the place. A lot of sculptures of Gudea, beautiful, beautiful sculptures. And the artistic achievements of the Sumerians are just remarkable. So we have a lot of Gudea pictures, and he's sitting on a throne usually. And Gudea was the ruler of Lagash, and he was evidently the ruler over a large area. And he has many inscriptions which tell essentially of the great buildings that he created, the great buildings that he made, temples that he restored, and so on. But it's a Sumerian Renaissance because all of his writings are in the Sumerian language. But you can see by that time, it's the last gasp or the last flourishing of Sumerian, because it's overwhelmed by Babylonian shortly thereafter. And the Babylonian rulers are these people who have the names of what we call West Semitic types, or Phoenician names, or Hebrew names, which are now put into Babylonian form.